What if the smiling, witty, kite-flying Benjamin Franklin you learned about in school wasn't the real Franklin at all? What if the $100 face was only a mask, carefully crafted to hide a man with secrets? Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on Franklin's darker side, a side that included shadowy dealings with spies, connections to secret societies, and even human skeletons buried beneath his London home. He was an inventor, a diplomat, a philosopher, but he was also a man who thrived in secrecy, contradiction, and sometimes scandal. So let's ask the question that history books avoid. Who was the real Benjamin Franklin? The Benjamin Franklin most people know is the self-made American genius. The story usually begins with him running away from his family in Boston at age 17, penniless, with nothing but his determination and a head full of ideas. He becomes a printer, publishing witty sayings under fake names, including the famous Poor Richard's Almanac, which gave the colonies practical advice about thrift, hard work, and virtue. From there, Franklin is remembered as the cheerful tinkerer who invented bifocals, the lightning rod, the Franklin stove. He founded America's first lending library, the first volunteer fire department, and even helped organize the Postal Service. In this version of history, Franklin is not just a founding father, he's the embodiment of American ingenuity, a man who proved that in the New World, anyone could rise by talent alone. But this storybook Franklin is only half the picture. He was not just a man of ideas, but a man of relentless ambition. He didn't stumble into greatness. He built it, piece by piece, often by manipulating how others saw him. The boy who ran away became a master at constructing an image, a myth of humble beginnings, leading to great success. Even his famous autobiography, which generations of students have read, was more than a personal memoir. It was a work of self-promotion, a carefully curated narrative that showed Franklin not as he was, but as he wanted to be remembered. To truly understand Franklin, we have to go deeper into the contradictions, the shadows, and the secrets that shaped him. Franklin loved science, but more importantly, he loved how science made him look. His most famous experiment, the kite and key in a thunderstorm, is remembered as a moment of pure genius. But historians point out that this story, retold endlessly, was a performance as much as an experiment. Franklin made sure people heard about it, turning it into a tale of discovery that placed him at the center of the Enlightenment. He became the man who tamed lightning, the symbol of human reason defying nature. His inventions, the bifocals, the Franklin stove, the odometer for carriages, and the glass harmonica, were practical, yes, but they also served another purpose. They built his reputation as the man who improved everyday life. He famously refused to patent his inventions, claiming he wanted to give them freely to the public. It sounded generous, almost saintly, but it also boosted his popularity. By giving away his discoveries, he bought something patents could never give him: admiration, trust, and influence. Franklin's greatest invention was not any single device, but the persona of Benjamin Franklin himself. He understood the power of image long before modern branding existed. In Europe, he dressed simply in plain brown clothes and a fur cap, cultivating the look of a rustic American sage, even while surrounded by aristocrats in gilded halls. It was theater. Franklin the backwoods philosopher was a role, one that charmed audiences and made him seem both exotic and authentic. In reality, he was anything but rustic. He was calculating, cosmopolitan, and always aware of how people perceived him. To see Franklin's inventions only as scientific contributions misses the larger truth. They were also props in the lifelong play of Franklin creating, shaping, and selling the story of himself. Franklin's political career is often summed up by his time in France, where he secured French support for the American Revolution. Without that support, America may never have won independence. Franklin's wit, charm, and celebrity status made him a favorite among the French elite. He mingled with philosophers, dined with nobles, and dazzled ladies of the court with his humor. But the story of Franklin the diplomat is more complex than the legend suggests. Years earlier, in London, Franklin had served as colonial agent for Pennsylvania and several other colonies. He argued their grievances before Parliament, but many colonists accused him of being too cozy with the British establishment. He lived comfortably, enjoyed high society, and even earned the nickname the First American in Britain, though not always in admiration. When tensions escalated between the colonies and the Crown, Franklin found himself distrusted on both sides. In Paris, things grew even murkier. His household was full of intrigue. British spies intercepted his letters, and Franklin himself was accused of being too careless, or worse, of deliberately leaking information. He was surrounded by agents of multiple governments, each trying to manipulate him. Some historians believe Franklin played them all skillfully, while others suggest he was sometimes duped or complicit. The truth may be that Franklin was both, a brilliant negotiator when it suited him, and a man willing to blur lines when secrecy or deception offered him an advantage. In the shadowy world of 18th-century diplomacy, Franklin was not simply the wise old sage. He was a player in a dangerous game of espionage, betrayal, and survival. One of the most chilling discoveries connected to Franklin came long after his death. In 1998, workers renovating his former London home unearthed something horrifying: over 1,200 human bones buried in the basement. The remains belonged to at least 15 people, including 6 children. The official explanation is tied to William Hewson, a surgeon who had studied under Franklin's friend William Hunter. Hewson ran an anatomy school in the house while Franklin lived there, dissecting bodies at a time when cadavers were scarce and grave robbing was common. But the sheer number of remains, many showing marks of dissection and even trepanning, or holes drilled into skulls, raises unsettling questions. Could Franklin really have been unaware of what was happening beneath his feet? Or did he turn a blind eye, perhaps even participating in experiments himself? Some suggest Franklin's curiosity about science could easily have extended into areas that today would seem grotesque. The image of Franklin as a kindly old inventor doesn't square easily with the image of Franklin sipping tea while corpses were smuggled into his basement for dissection. Whether he wielded the scalpel or not, the fact remains: Franklin lived in a house where bodies were cut apart and secretly buried. It's one of those revelations that jolts us out of the sanitized version of history and forces us to see Franklin not as a simple genius, but as a man who lived comfortably among shadows, secrets, and even death. Franklin was a lifelong member of the Freemasons, one of the most influential secret societies of the 18th century. He rose quickly, becoming Grand Master of Pennsylvania's Masonic Lodge in 1734, and later joining lodges in France. For Franklin, Freemasonry was more than fraternity. It was a network, a way to move ideas and influence across borders. Masonic lodges were places where politics and philosophy could be discussed freely, where alliances could form under the cover of ritual. But Franklin's connections didn't end there. Some historians whisper of his ties to the infamous Hellfire Club in England, a society of elites known for wild parties, mock religious ceremonies, and scandalous behavior. The evidence is circumstantial. Franklin was friendly with men who belonged to the club, and his name appears in certain accounts. But whether he fully participated is debated. Still, Franklin's fascination with secrecy is undeniable. He thrived in environments where coded gestures, rituals, and secrecy created bonds stronger than public declarations. For Franklin, the world of secret societies was a laboratory for influence, a place where the seeds of revolution could be planted safely in whispers long before they erupted in public. To this day, some argue that the ideas of liberty and equality that shaped the American Revolution were nurtured in these very lodges, behind closed doors, under candlelight and oaths of secrecy. Franklin understood that revolutions don't just happen in open squares. They are born in secret rooms, shaped by men who understood the power of hidden hands. Franklin presented himself as a man of virtue, and his Poor Richard's Almanac overflowed with moral sayings. Early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. These lines became the creed of a new nation built on hard work and self-improvement. But Franklin's own life was far more complicated. He fathered an illegitimate son, William, who grew up to be a loyalist governor and Franklin's bitter opponent during the Revolution. He had countless flirtations and relationships, even well into old age, often with women much younger than himself. His letters are filled with flirtatious and sometimes scandalous remarks, showing a man far less restrained than his public advice suggested. Franklin was also ruthless when it came to politics. He cultivated an image of humility in Paris, dressing plainly while others wore silk. But this was deliberate performance. He understood that his homespun look played into French fantasies of America as a land of noble simplicity. Franklin preached virtue, but he practiced manipulation. This gap between public virtue and private behavior wasn't just hypocrisy, it was strategy. Franklin knew morality was a tool, something you could wield to build trust and influence. He understood that the image of a man mattered more than the reality. In the end, Franklin's power came not from living up to the virtues he preached, but from convincing others that he did. Benjamin Franklin's name endures as one of the greatest Americans. He signed the Declaration of Independence, the Treaty of Paris, and the Constitution. No other founder signed all three. He left behind institutions, inventions, writings, and sayings that still shape American identity. But he also left behind a legacy of shadows, bones hidden beneath his home, whispered ties to secret societies, allegations of espionage and betrayal, contradictions between the values he preached and the life he lived. Franklin was a man of paradoxes, a believer in liberty who owned slaves early in life before becoming an abolitionist, a preacher of virtue who lived a life of indulgence, a champion of reason who thrived in secrecy. To remember only the smiling sage is to miss the deeper truth that Franklin, like America itself, was built on contradictions. His story reminds us that history is never simple, that the heroes we celebrate are often more complex, more human, and more flawed than the myths allow. So, who was the real Benjamin Franklin? A genius who tamed lightning, built libraries, and charmed kings? Or a man who dabbled in shadows, who carefully hid his secrets behind wit and wisdom? Maybe the truth is that he was both, and that's what makes him so fascinating. What did you think about today's video? Comment your thoughts and suggestions for my next video below, and let's keep uncovering The Hidden Stories of America Together.